4 weeks ago, I've challenged myself to finish off my indie game project Will You Snail within just 4 weeks. Now the time for this challenge is up, and of course I've documented the final week of development for you, so let's see how it went and what we ended up with.
Why would you download a platformer game if you're that bad at jumping?
In Will You Snail, you go head to head with a superhuman evil AI that tries to predict your movement and spawns traps in real time.
What can I say? My laser placement is just way too good.
It's a pretty crazy game with a ton of variety in gameplay, plus it also has a little bit of a story for you to figure out. In case that sounds interesting for you, I highly recommend you head over to Steam and hit the wishlist button, because that way you won't miss the launch in 2020.
I'm good. Complete file.
Just do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. At this point I was still lacking 2 music tracks for the game, so that's what I started to tackle on Monday. First up was the music for the final boss battle of the game. If you've seen last week's devlog, then you know that I've already got a little bit of an idea for that one.
I think I actually just found a cool melody for the boss fight.
So copying that idea into Cubase was step number 1. After that I started to flesh it out a little bit and to add a couple more instruments.
Not even close.
And just from listening to this you might already be able to tell that this doesn't really fit the boss fight that well yet. It doesn't really have enough tension yet. The problem was, for a long time I didn't notice that at all because I was too focused on making the music.
Just put the music into the game real quick to see if I need to change something or if it works like that. Is trying to get a feel for whether I'm already getting the correct feeling for the boss fight.
No, I did not. So the first thing I did was speeding the music up a little bit and adding a drum track. Also I added this epic section at the end.
This is your doom, human. Meet your master.
And then I listened to that music while watching some boss fight footage, which by the way is a great workflow. Unfortunately I noticed that it was still not quite what I was looking for. It still didn't have that, oh my god, I'm going up against something super huge kind of feel. So I tried to rework the music a little bit to capture that, which I partially succeeded in, but unfortunately in terms of the feel it was still not where I wanted to yet. I think I put a bit much pressure on myself because I knew that this would be the final song of the game. This is more or less the last thing you hear. So I just wanted this track to be worthy of the grand finale, which due to my high expectations was a bit tricky to pull off. It was already starting to get dark, I still didn't have a good concept for the boss fight music, and I was seriously considering to start over with the entire track. But as usual, a little break helped me to clear my mind. And after just a bit more experimentation, this is what I came up with.
This is your doom, human. Meet your master.
So pretty epic, I was quite happy with that. I even kept most of the other parts in the track as well, so I didn't have to throw away too much. Just the overall feel has a lot more tension and is a lot more end boss worthy now.
For the higher intelligence.
The second and final music track I was still missing was the one for combat. There are a couple of parts in Will You Snail where you get a gun and can fight enemies. The track started out like this time paying a little more attention to how I wanted it to feel right from the get-go. After a bit more fine-tuning, the second version then sounded like this. I of course made sure to test it in-game very early this time around. Then I added this section. And then I just polished it out a little bit for the final track. So that is more or less the entire soundtrack of the game complete. I've already been asked a couple of times if I'll release the soundtrack somewhere. Rest assured, yes, you'll be able to listen to it both here on YouTube, and you'll probably also be able to get it as a DLC on Steam. Of course, I had to rush these 2 tracks a little bit for my 4-week challenge. My main concern right now is that these tracks might become a little annoying when listening to them too many times, but for this 4-week challenge, like, good enough. Let's move on. I started into Wednesday with a giant playtesting session, so basically just playing through the entire game and writing everything down that I still wanted to change. The ironical thing was that I spent so much time playtesting that I didn't even have that much more time to make anything else happen. Now let's obviously focus on the bugs first.
Error. This voice line has not been recorded yet. Error. This voice line has not been recorded yet. You taught me how to manipulate and kill on your behalf. Error. This voice line has not been recorded yet.
Some of the voice lines seemed to be missing or were not triggered properly. So I went back into Cubase, where I figured out that yes, in fact, those voice lines were just missing. So I ended up re-recording some of them.
Hello, human. Welcome to my simulation. Hello, human. Welcome to my simulation.
Took a little bit of time, but was an easy fix, so I could cross it off the list. Some of the other bugs were a little harder to find and reproduce, like this one here, where Squid keeps rambling on about reducing the difficulty.
Yes, score. Not even close, noob. Seems like I need to reduce the difficulty again. That was clearly too much for you. And I reduced the difficulty again. Or increased the difficulty for me, depending on how you look at it. Please don't close the game yet. I want to keep torturing you. Difficulty level decreased.
That was clearly 1 or 2 voice lines too much right there. Took me a while to hunt that bug down, but I eventually found it. Then I made sure Squid's face stays attached to the drone during the boss battle. And at the end of the day, my list looked like this, which to be honest, I was quite happy with.
Challenge for today, crossing as many things as possible off of this list. Let's go!
So that's pretty much what I did. A couple of bug fixes, a couple of improvements here and there. For example, I experimented with the underwater movement some more, but eventually decided to keep it the way it is now. Squid in the boss fight got a little visual update from this to this, so I basically just made it look a little less like a placeholder graphic. It's by no means perfect yet, but with my time limit I have to do what I have to do. Which brings us to the question, but Jonas, what will you do after this week when your game is finished? And to be honest, the answer to that is I'll probably just keep working on the game anyway, because the goal of this 4-week challenge was to get the game to a point where in theory I could hit the publish button at any time, and in fact I think I have achieved that successfully. But that being said, of course the game is still a little rough around the edges. Of course there are still a ton of things I could do to make it even better, which means yes, I'll absolutely use my time till launch to get the most out of this game.
A couple of small things still missing, but nothing major.
Balancing the second phase of the boss fight was another big task on Thursday, but in the end I got pretty much everything done.
Very nice. I'm very happy right now.
Now before we have a look at the final result, I'd say let's see what we've learned and accomplished during these 4 weeks. You might remember week 1, where we implemented a ton of new story elements into the game. Next challenge, drawing a monkey in Will You Snail look. Great monkey. This is a monkey. Also, I made it way too small. Week 2, where we implemented a ton of placeholder voice lines into the game and did a lot of writing. Some parts of your development plan always take longer than you think. Seems like this was the one. I've written about 100 voice lines just as starting voice lines for the level. So for example, voice lines like this right here. Oh, it's already time for the laser show. I love the laser show. Not to forget about week 3, where I almost went insane by recording 600 voice lines.
No, come back! You will die! You will all... I'm fine. Totally fine.
Of course, we all know that by the end of the week, I was no longer fine.
I can hear the voice lines. They are talking to me.
And of course now week 4, where I made the 2 remaining music tracks that were still missing and just fixed a bunch of other small stuff that was still left to do. The main things I've learned from all of this is once again that yes, it is possible to get a lot done without crunching. I felt extremely productive even though I worked only for 6 hours a day. And I definitely feel like this is a work mode I could keep up without burning out for quite a while. Then secondly, definitely make sure to include some buffer time in your development plan. The buffer time I included in my development plan definitely saved me big time, otherwise it would have been so stressful. Take enough breaks and think twice about making a game that requires a lot of voice lines. Now let's have a look at the result. Hope you enjoyed this little 4-part mini-series. Don't forget to wishlist Will You Snail on Steam, and now here's what we ended up with.
Have you ever asked yourself why you're here? You taught me how to manipulate and kill on your behalf, so that's what I did. Everybody is how you catch a bowling ball. Perfectly executed. I'll make you suffer once I